Thank you very much. So, participants, welcome to session 3A for today on climate information and climate services for the region. Indeed, we know that climate information is extremely important for the region. And at today's session, we are hoping to see what kind of climate information is available for the Caribbean, how it is being developed, and what is being provided, and then finally, how we're delivering it to the participants, the stakeholders in country, and to see how they are using these services. I'm very pleased to announce that we have three fantastic panelists today. We have Dr. Cedric Meerbeeck from the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, located in Barbados. We have Mrs. Jacqueline Spence-Hemmings of the Met Service of Jamaica, and we have Dr. Stephen Wade from HR Wallingford, who will be joining us today. So to make use of these 45 minutes that we have this morning, I would like to invite Dr. Cedric Van Meerbeeck of the CIMH to make his presentation. Cedric is the resident climatologist at the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology in Barbados, where he's a lecturer not only there, but also at the University of the West Indies at the Cave Hill campus in Barbados. He has a PhD from the University in Amsterdam. His responsibilities for the region include coordinating applied climate research, developing and operationally delivering climate information products and services, and delivering training of professional meteorologists. He's especially credited for developing the region's capacity to provide climate prediction and early warning information through the Caribbean Regional Climate Outlook Forums, which is setting the standard from around the world. He serves the WMO and is recognized as a technical expert, trainer, and regional representative. Cedric, may I hand it over to you for your presentation?
Thank you very much, Carlos, for the kind introduction. And with no further ado, let me try to share my screen. Could you kindly confirm if you can see it?
Yes, I can. If you could put it into
yes.
Great.
There we go. Okay, so this is a relatively short session, so let me not waste too much time with fluff and go right into the meat of the matter. So I want to talk to you a bit about regional climate services with a few considerations also for climate services at the national level. This is as a presentation made out of the CIMH, or the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology. Why is it that we are so interested in making such a contribution to the region? Is as part of our duties as the WMO, or the World Meteorological Organization's designated Regional Climate Center for the Caribbean. So what does that entail? That entails that quite a big portion of our business is to develop the region's capacity to provide climate services. Now, for those who are not very well acquainted with what climate services are, very simply put, climate services could be defined as any sort of climate information that is being provided to and utilized by user stakeholders to improve their decision-making with an evidence-based. So climate services are a relatively new field, and because of the young field in which, or the younger generation of this kind of climate, there was a need to frame it at the global level to coordinate their development and to come up with the vision. So the WMO, through the World Climate Conference in 2000, has devised this vision called the Global Framework for Climate Services. That vision states that the aim of the GFCS is to enable better management of the risks of climate variability and climate change through the development and incorporation of science-based in climate information and prediction into planning, policy, and practice. Very critical here is that it is science-based information. We are never going to accept the provision of information that is not evidence-based, not data-driven. This is one of our policies at the Regional Climate Center. Now, the GFCS for short, so the Global Framework for Climate Services, contains 5 important pillars on which the whole climate services agenda has been built. So the first one is called observations and monitoring. This deals with the network of stations and all the instrumentation that is needed to provide climate information, to analyze also the climate databases that are required to analyze climate data, and putting this kind of analyses into the form of climate early warning through monitoring information. The second pillar is called research modeling and prediction, and this is where we're going to try to look at the climate data and merge that wherever possible with socioeconomic sector outcome data to do some research that allows us to build models that can predict climate impacts across the sectors that are affected by weather and climate. And to then provide access to this kind of monitoring and prediction information, there's an operational core, which is the third pillar of the GFCS, which is called the Climate Services Information System. This system is then interacting with the users, which you can see on top, through what is called the user interface mechanism. And you can think of different things there. You can think of platforms online. You can think of user stakeholder forums. You can think of many ways in which the interaction between the information and the end user is taking place. And it's not just a one-way street. It is also a means for the users to provide feedback and to provide their input on the priorities for information, and therefore the development to inform the development of user-tailored climate services. So if you look at the first pillar, the essential need for an infrastructure to generate these climate data has been built throughout the region over the decades that have gone by. But there is a renewed interest in developing a better, more dense network of equipment. And so we're talking about weather observation equipment, for instance, rain gauges, water level sensors, automatic weather stations. But we don't do that as meteorologists or hydrologists alone. Rather, we partner with our sector stakeholders to make sure that we reduce a gap in climate information for their needs. This note that it's also including remotely sensed data like satellite imagery, for instance, for a more complete observation of the entire globe. But it also entails non-meteorological monitoring. For instance, what happens to our sectors when they are impacted by weather and climate events? So this is what we call weather or climate impacts data. And such data, together with the weather data, are then stored in what we call climate climate impacts databases. Once the data are stored there, they can be analyzed and converted into monitoring information. So then the second pillar was called research modeling and prediction. And this pillar is essential to advance the science or the evidence base that we need to guide the development of improved climate services, because ultimately climate information only becomes a service once it is user-friendly, once it is actually uptaken and used for better decision-making by the end user. So some examples of the research that goes into developing climate services is, for instance, drought research, where we want to aim at providing effective drought early warning information, but also on policy making and planning related to drought mitigation and drought response. A second example is heat health research. And heat health, you could think of the heat discomfort and the heat diseases that ensue from overexposure to heat in humans, but it's also important to consider animal health because of different considerations. But for instance, our protein intake depends on a healthy stock of livestock. We also perform social sciences research to make sure that we understand the capacities of climate centers, like for instance, National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, to deliver climate services, as well as on user needs assessments for climate information. And then another example finally is where we look at climate and its relationship to vector-borne diseases. So these four are some of the examples of the research that goes into developing operational climate services. And there is where we are at our third pillar, the climate services information system. In other words, this is where you can access all the kind of operational climate information that is available. This entails climate monitoring information, climate prediction information, or climate outlooks, if you will, but also communication products that, if you look at the right top end of the slide, it can be either hazard tailored with the Caribbean Drought Bulletin, or it can be sector tailored information for better decision making in that sector, for instance, the Caribbean Tourism Climatic Bulletin. But very importantly, most decisions are of course made at the national level. And this is where some of our Met services, through the efforts in the PPCR project, the regional track of the PPCR, has been providing support to develop and deliver national climate bulletins in 4 countries of the PPCR. Now that we have those products, it's essential that there's good user interfacing in place. So user interfacing means engaging users, which can make their voices heard through such mechanisms and make sure that their climate services they receive are relevant to their needs. So this can come under the form, for instance, of sector stakeholder forums. A very well-known example in parts of the Caribbean by now is the Caribbean Climate Outlook Forum, of which the current wet and hurricane season version of this biannual forum is currently ongoing. But these climate outlook forums, they happen also at the national scale. And what they do, they present the latest climate forecasts to discuss it between the meteorologist and the climate scientist on the one hand, and the users of the information on the other hand,
Cedric,
to enable them to be prepared.
Could you begin wrapping up, because we could get into this more when we have our discussion. Thanks.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'm almost done anyway. Thank you, Carlos. So these stakeholder forums are really a means for communication, awareness building, education, and feedback. And one particular type of forum that is critical to the design, development, and delivery of tailored climate products and services in 6 climate-sensitive sectors in the Caribbean is what we call the Consortium of Sectoral USACS Partners, which consists of 6 climate-sensitive sector representative organizations. Those are all regional organizations, and a number of observer organizations. And the aim is really to co-develop, produce climate information that is relevant for decision making. The final pillar is capacity building. And I just want to mention that it's critical to build our capacity, both for in the climate services provider community, as well as in the user community. And just to give one example of each, through the PPCR, there have been national training workshops on seasonal forecasting and other climate products for 6 PPCR countries. In the user community, we're not just talking about our socioeconomic sectors. What is very critical is also to engage the media and train the media in the interpretation and the application of climate information so that they can make the information available to the broad public. This is my last slide. I will leave it on the screen for just a moment. It just summarizes a few of the steps that were done under the CIMH implementations in the regional track of the PPCR project over the past couple of years. That's it for me. Thank you, Carlos. And thank you, participants.
Thank you very much, Cedric. And indeed, there are many topics that you've touched upon, and I'm pretty sure that as we get into the discussions, we'll be coming back to them in our discussions. But thank you very much for setting the stage. So we have heard of the initiatives at the regional level, and of course, those regional initiatives are then fed down to the national level. And joining us today, we have Mrs. Jacqueline Spence-Hemmings, from the Meteorological Service of Jamaica, where she has been working for the past 17 years as the head of the climate branch. In this capacity, she is responsible for the management of the data collection network, which covers the entire island, while using that to engage in research activities in the development of climate services and products to inform decision-making and resilience building in various sectors of Jamaica. I'm very pleased to know that my friend Jackie is also serves as a focal point for Jamaica through the IPCC. So Jackie, can I turn it over to you for your presentation? Please remember you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Carlos, and good morning again, everyone. Let me just get the share screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, I think. Yes, we can now.
Okay. Right. So jumping right into the meat of the matter to save time. The Meteorological Service of Jamaica basically consists of two technical branches, and the climate branch is one of those. The Meteorological Service falls under the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change. The climate branch is basically made up of three sections: data acquisition, data processing, and applied met. And basically the mandate of the climate branch is we are responsible for maintaining a current database of the climate of Jamaica and the utilization of this data in informing the productive sectors of the country. So first of all, we'll look at gaps that we had in the data acquisition network. There was need for more automated data collection equipment because we were historically using rain gauges, but as we all know, rain gauges only collect rainfall data. And in this realm or new time of climate change, we are required to provide far more information on parameters such as temperature, humidity, several others. So the rain gauges, while they serve their purpose, would not be sufficient for us to really answer the mandate that we have. We also needed, as I mentioned, wider collection of meteorological parameters and a wider collection of data in farming areas. So the PPCR project answered some of the issues that we had by procuring and installing 35 automatic weather stations. There was also procurement of soil moisture probes, of which 20 were already installed, procurement and installation of tide gauges, procurement and installation of weather radar, which is currently being installed, and training in installation of soil moisture probes. I am not sure you'll be able to make out exactly what's on this map, but if you can see the red stars and the green stars, they represent the current coverage that we have for 10 meter and 2 meter AWSs. And the difference, 2 meter AWSs are used for agrometeorological purposes, while the 10 meter is more for meteorological purposes. So wind is collected at 2 meter for the agromet and at 10 meter for the meteorological stations. Going on to the data processing section, this section is responsible for the quality control processing of information that is collected. And this green circle that you're seeing is pointing to a gap that we have in the data processing section, where the actual processing of information and the storage, currently we have a need right there. The information comes in, a lot of the work that is done manually. The quality control is manually done. The storage is not properly done now. We don't have a system in place for that. So as I said, this is a serious gap we have in the data processing section. So we also had a need to recover and recreate historical data loss in fire. We lost data in a fire in 1992, and we have not quite recovered yet. We are still in that process. And we have a need for real-time delivery of data from the network that I showed you previously. We also need a functional database and automation of quality control procedures. So the PPCR, in this respect, provided data infilling that was done by the UA Climate Studies Group to allow us to fill back our data historically so that we are better able to inform research needs for the country. Work is ongoing to develop a real-time monitoring network, which will allow retrieval of data from the automatic weather stations I showed before to inform the early warning system. And training is currently happening as the system is being developed. The final section, the applied mid-section, answers the needs of various clients, ag sector, hydrologists, engineers, providing climatological information to resolve legal insurance issues, and very importantly, to answer research questions. So I think the research requests are probably the largest number of requests we get in the applied mid-section. And these are some of the products that are provided from that section: the Agromet Bulletin, which speaks more to the farming communities; the Monthly Rainfall Summary, which speaks to a larger audience. It would go not just to the agriculture, but water sector, health. Everyone would use this information. And there's also a climate outlook, as mentioned by Cedric before. This is one of the products that we provide to give an indication of what the outlook for the next 3 months would be for rainfall and temperature. But there are also gaps for the applied mid-section: development of more customized climate services and products, and the need for training. So that capacity building that Cedric mentioned is definitely key to us getting to the point where we are able to answer the needs of our various stakeholders. And under the PPCR, there was some work done here as well, where crop modeling, introduction to crop modeling training was done. There was also training in the analysis of soil moisture data to inform irrigation decisions. So we see that the different sections of the climate branch basically benefited from all the work that happened under the PPCR project. And although we still have needs, we have been carried a far way by the different interventions provided by the PPCR project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's great to see all the work you're now doing in Jamaica in the area of climate and expanding that from where we used to be looking at daily weather, now looking at the climate information. Our next speaker will really address how PPCR has responded to the region's needs. So Dr. Stephen Wade has over 25 years of experience in hydrology and climatology at HR Wallingford, the UK Met Office, and now at his present post at Atkins Infrastructure. He provides advice on water resources and climate resilience in the water, energy, and transport sectors globally, with experience of working in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Since 2017, he worked with the World Bank as an international hydrological advisor in Myanmar. And he's presently completing a review of the pilot program for climate resilience, the PPCR Hydromet investments, and providing consultancy reports for the South African development community, SADC in Botswana. Like most of us, Stephen has been working at home, but he continues to work with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank on weather and climate services projects around the world. Stephen, over to you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. I'll just share my screen. Yeah, so hopefully that's coming through. So I lead a team at Atkins.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, that's great, Carlos, thanks. And we're doing a learning review of SIF-supported hydromet and climate services projects, very much in partnership with the SIF team and with inputs from the 12 relevant PPCR projects. And I think I have some colleagues will also be on the conference call today. Now, in terms of just a little bit of context about the project, it's part of the CIF Learning and Evaluation Initiative. And the project looks towards continued and enhanced support for hydromet development in the years to come. So the learning review is aiming to take stock of CIF's decade-long experience of financing hydromet projects and basically pull out the good practices and the lessons learned to help us design new projects going forward. Now, the scope of the work is summarized here. It considers the whole project cycle from the project concept through design and implementation. It's based around a series of reflective and prospective questions, some learning questions, and it's concerned with the weather and climate services value chain. And for those not familiar with that, that is based on the 5 components summarized here. So everything from observation and monitoring through to our goal, which is improved services. And all of that is, of course, underpinned by capacity building. Now, a lot of what was discussed yesterday, I joined some of the conference, was about climate change, but just to confirm here, we're interested in weather forecasting at various time scales, so from short range to long range to seasonal, right through to climate services for this project. And the learning questions, as I said, some of them look back at the performance of the projects and some look forward, but they're really about what motivated the projects, what are their key features, what really worked well, and what we can learn for future projects. In terms of the forward-looking questions, we're interested in what the priority needs are for further hydromet development in the PPCR countries, and also what are the key elements of funding strategies for sustainable and functional hydromet services in the PPCR countries. And the sustainability question is really the key one, because of, as we've heard, I think throughout the conference, there is an increasing demand for these services, but I think the pace of investment doesn't always keep up. So the funding issue and sustainability is still, the key question as part of this review. So what approach have we taken? We've done a desk review and we've engaged with stakeholders from 12 projects, 47 in total so far. And in the Caribbean, that involves a number of projects. So the Jamaica Improving Climate Data and Information Management Project, the Haiti Strengthening Hydrometeorological Services Project, and a number of projects under the Disaster Vulnerability and Reduction Project umbrella, as well as finally the investment plan for the Caribbean Regional Track of PPCR. We're only partway through the study. We'll be having some country workshops to get further feedback and validating some of our early findings. But I'm just going to share some of the things that are coming up. So around the learning questions, just a couple of things to really highlight here. There are kind of 3 types of PPCR weather and climate projects. There's firstly the type that I call the GFDRR model. It's where there's significant investment in extending and modernizing the observation and monitoring capacity of a Met service. Then there's a lot of capacity building and improvement of services. And then in the Caribbean, we've seen a lot of projects under the DVRP. And now these projects tend to be mostly around resilient infrastructure, but also include a weather and climate element. And that's really helped to strengthen the links between weather and climate services and specific infrastructure clients. And then we have particular projects which are very focused on regional integration. And we see those in the Caribbean. We also see them in other parts of the world. And in terms of the good practices that are coming up, there's lots of things that can be highlighted, but I just take a moment to highlight 3 things that I think come through really strongly in the Caribbean projects. First of all, successful projects have generally involved developing open data portals or making data as well as services available to a wide range of users. Secondly, they've really done a great job at involving stakeholders and users. And in the Caribbean, we've seen multi-stakeholder project steering groups. We've seen various user groups, some of which Cedric's been talking about. And we've seen hazard committees, etc. And that engagement is a key ingredient to successful projects. And finally, the most successful projects have allowed some room for innovation, whether that's in the monitoring network or research and modeling and forecasting. Just moving on to get some perspectives from the region, just to look at two contrasting examples here. So first of all, an investment in Jamaica. So that's followed more the GFDRR model. So a lot of investment in improving and extending the observations and monitoring network, as well as looking at data management and capacity building. Now that project has certainly been enabled, or the progress was enabled by very good user engagement throughout. And I think there's a very clear view of what's needed next in terms of future investment priorities. So because there's been already an extension of the network, the future focus is really firmly focused on improved services, along with research and forecasting and further integration and data management. Now that contrasts to perhaps examples in the smaller Caribbean islands where there hasn't really been an extension of the observation and monitoring network. There's been some improvements in the existing networks only, and a stronger focus on data management and capacity building. And in quite a lot of those projects, they've really benefited from a kind of upgrade to some of the basic ICT, GIS, remote sensing, etc. And going forward, I think there's still an ambition to do some extensions and gap filling in the observations and monitoring network, but again, an agreement that the main focus should be on improved services. We've seen a bit about the Jamaica project, so I'm not going to highlight too much here, just to say that it has been a successful project in that it exceeded its objectives in terms of developing the observation network and data management, but it did face challenges, and I think those challenges are leading to lessons learned which will inform future projects. And some of those lessons are around engagement, working with users, but also some of the issues around procurement, which can always be quite a challenge on major investment projects. And in future, there's interest in further systems integration and the development of service delivery platforms, working with different sectors, so developing services in different sectors, and continuing to promote more government-to-government projects and regional cooperation. So if we look at the experience globally, there's quite a few things coming through from the review at this early stage. Again, there isn't time to go into all of these, but I'll just focus, I think, on one thing for the design of new projects, which is an interest in more iterative user-driven design rather than what we're calling the linear value chain design. So, we've had some investment in observation networks. So rather than think we've got to develop the observation network, then do data management, then develop new services, to very much focus on the services that are required, work out what can we do with the data we've already got, what can we do with regional models, what can we do with other global products to improve those services, and then fill the gaps in the value chain to deliver that service. I think that's coming through strongly as the way to design some of the future projects. And what that's leading to, and this is early findings, and this is a mixture of feedback from our PPCR colleagues and also some emerging best practice in this area. We're seeing some kind of hallmarks of successful projects in weather and climate services, particularly I think the need to continue to improve government partnerships. And at the UK Met Office, we always called this government to government business, because most of the funding comes from our government departments, to definitely kind of explore local markets and see if there are any opportunities for working in the private sector, but perhaps more importantly for the Caribbean, to continue strengthening national, regional and global partnerships to deliver better services. Really important to invest in people. In examples in Met services around the world, there's a real struggle sometimes to maintain talent, particularly related to digital skills as well as meteorology and hydrology. And we need our projects to help us pilot and then roll out better weather and climate services. So due to time, that's all I was going to say, but I've spoken to many colleagues in the Caribbean on these projects. I hope that I'm managed to speak to many others as we finish up, but please do get in contact with me or the SIF team if you'd like to feed into the learning review. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And indeed, really, I liked that last slide on the hallmarks of a successful project, and indeed, how we should develop new projects in the future to build on what has occurred. So we have about 10 minutes for some dialogue among us. And Cedric, could I go back to you? And the first stage of our work is really in ensuring that we have an existing network of weather stations. Is the present network serving the needs of the Caribbean, or are there areas that we need to develop more? Cedric?
Thank you, Carlos. This is an important question, not only from a meteorological standpoint, but from the standpoint of the value of the climate information that we can produce. In terms of hydrometeorological data, the networks are quite expansive. The data has very high quality. In fact, met data are probably the most highly sanctioned data of any field except maybe in aviation, in civil aviation. And so the standards are very, very tight and strict. And so the data are quite dependable and reliable. But of course, there are gaps. I mean, there will always be gaps in data availability, but there's a lot that we can do and a lot more we can do with the data that's already available. However, to achieve some of that potential of the analysis of the data we already have, there's an even bigger gap, and that is the availability of climate impacts data and more generally socioeconomic sector outcome data, because we need to relate climate with outcomes in our society in order to be able to provide early warning information that is tailored to the user's needs and therefore enables them to provide or to make better decisions. So it's really about making the information more actionable. For that, we need the same level of standard or the same standard in socioeconomic outcome data exchange and analysis as we have for our climate data. So I would suggest that the larger gap is the latter one.
Thank you very much for that, Cedric. Jackie, if I could turn to you. You indicated, first of all, I was very surprised that the gaps that you identified within the applied met was more research was what had been required. But you also said that there are some areas for specialized products sectors that we need to address. And I wanted to also to note that you said that you had lost all that data in the 1992 fire, but one of the great things about having a CIMH as our regional archiving center was that they would have some of that data to be able to assist you in recovering that data. So that's another important aspect of having a regional climate center like the CIMH in the region. But indeed, you said there are other areas, other sectors that maybe we are not providing the climate services for, and we need to provide. And just to link that to a question that Dr. Hospitalis from the medical community had mentioned, is that an area that we still need to provide services for? Thanks, Jackie.
Hi, Carlos. Thanks for the question. Just to mention, Carlos, that the loss of the data in 92 pointed to some gaps in the Met Office. I wasn't there, but the submission of the data to CIMH was not happening routinely. So as a result, CIMH was not able to help us much in that area. So that's a definite lesson learned going forward. But in terms of the needs for climate services, yes, there are persons that we still are not reaching. Tourism is one. We have tried, but we still need to get them to the table, because the whole sargassum issue is one that we are facing in Jamaica. So we need to get tourism to the table. We also need to get health. That's a very critical one as well, to provide, to work on what exactly we could provide them with to answer their needs as it relates to decision making. Because right now, I think we're meeting some of the agricultural requirements, some of the water requirements, but health, tourism, we're still not there at all with and I know they have needs. It's just that, we have not gotten the opportunity to sit with them at the table and really discuss and figure out what those needs are. We are currently working with the fisheries sector, and that is the end game is to develop some kind of product for them that will inform fisheries. So we're not quite dealing with fisheries right now. When I say agriculture, I'm really speaking to the farms and that kind of thing. So yes, we definitely have those gaps that we still have need to fill.
Thanks, Jackie. Stephen, if I could turn to you, it was interesting that you mentioned that in some of the smaller islands, you did not necessarily, the project did not necessarily expand the data network, network, but in fact strengthen them, which I thought was important. And that's an area that I think many of us in the region have been concerned about, that projects from the World Bank, other major institutions, like to put in data in hardware that they have provided something, but very little money is available, very little support is provided for maintenance of existing systems. I wonder if that is an area, a lesson learned, that maybe we need to see how we can do that. And the issue that Cedric mentioned, the impacts data, will there be scope in some future to be able to gather that kind of data instead of the data that you get through a automatic weather station and so on? Thanks.
Yeah, I think on the first part of the question, particularly when you want to disperse large amounts of money, there's always a tendency to want to buy big ticket, items and capital expenditure. And traditionally, it's always been difficult to fund operational expenditure certainly on loans. But I think donors, development partners are finding ways of trying to support that by projects I've worked on. We've packaged quite a lot of maintenance and operational support. Maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years with the purchase of equipment. So there's ways to think about it during a project. And I think it's important it's always important to emphasize, to have a plan for the operational maintenance of any equipment that's installed. I think on impacts data, I think the direction, I think some of the projects, the PPCR projects, make great progress collecting LiDAR data and some of the sort of fundamental background mapping required to start looking at impacts. And I think going forward, there needs to be more sort of pilot work on impact-based forecasting, which should certainly include the collection of that impacts data. And I would expect that should be included as part of future projects in this area.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. Colleagues, we have about 2 minutes left, so I won't try to wrap up, but maybe if I could invite each of you to maybe give us a 30-second final word for the audience. Cedric, could I start with you?
Sure, thank you very much, Carlos. And I would like to lend my support to the words that were given by Jackie and Stephen. All of that is really relevant in terms of shaping the future of climate services. It's really going to be both on a technological side of things, but also much more on reaching the end user, especially the most vulnerable. And you can only reach the most vulnerable if the communication channels are there, if the information is actionable to them, and therefore in a language and in a format that is accessible to them. And so that is an aspect of climate services that keeps being a gap around the world at this stage, but that we're slowly starting to figure out. And one of the ways in which we're doing that is in a collaboration between the Pan American Health Organization, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and CIMH to look at how to provide successfully and reach successfully the users with climate information relevant to their health.
Thanks, Cedric. And if you note, health is going to be the next topic on today's agenda. Jackie, any closing words?
Just to say, thanks to the PPCR project for all the achievements, and most importantly, the kind of, structure that was taken, this collaborative approach, the partnerships with CIMH and other agencies will definitely put us in a better place to answer these needs that we have in terms of building our resilience to climate variability and change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And Stephen, we're looking forward for the final reports coming out of the PPCR. Any closing remarks?
Thanks. I mean, I just re-emphasize the importance of partnerships. So partnerships between government departments, partnerships between Ireland and the regional weather and climate community. And to extend that globally as well, because I mean, I used to work for the Met Office. The Met Office have just invested £1.2 billion in their next supercomputer. So we've got an arm race of fantastic global computing facilities, and I think we need to link up everything from national forecasting efforts through the regional to the global efforts from these global centres as well.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. And indeed, but to get those models to work, we need data to feed into it. So let me thank Stephen, Cedric, and Jackie for a really informative session today, and for the over 60 participants who joined us at today's session. And please join the remaining breakout groups as we conclude today's sessions on the PPCR in the region. Thank you very much and have a great day.